Hi class, welcome to chapter 8, and this chapter deals all about photosynthesis. I'm going to do something just a little bit different in this set of notes. I did divide these notes into two parts, so you'll have to make sure you watch part 1 and part 2. It just made it easier to upload the videos so they're not as long, and that way you're not sitting for as long of a period of time either. But one thing that I did differently in these notes is I've placed questions throughout the notes for you to think about and answer. There will still be a quiz at the end of all these notes, but maybe some of these questions will help you think through the information as we go along. Plus, I'll be explaining to you some test-taking skills or question-answering skills by doing it this way as well. All right, so let's begin. So this is just a think about it type of question. Homeostasis is hard work. Organisms and the cells within them have to grow and develop, move materials around, build new molecules, and respond to environmental changes. So organisms like plants, like animals, like funguses and little bacteria, all of the organisms that are alive on our planet have to do all of the things that are listed here. So the question is, what powers so much activity, and where does that power come from? How are all these organisms able to do all the things that they can do? They have to have a source of energy. It's not like they can plug into the wall and get it. So that's essentially where we're starting, is the source of all this energy. Some key concept questions that you'll be able to answer when we're done. Where do plants get the energy they need to produce food? What is the role of ATP in cellular activities? What is the overall equation for photosynthesis? What is the role of light and chlorophyll in photosynthesis? And what is the function of stomates and guard cells? So here, this is going to just an overview of the needs or the energy needs of living things. So all life, we know, needs a constant input of energy. Animals, like us, we're considered heterotrophs, and you do need to highlight heterotrophs. That's a vocabulary term. And if you were to pull out your yellow cardstock and look up heterotroph, you would know that hetero means other, and troph means nutrition. So heterotrophs have to eat others for their nutrition. And as you know, we need to consume food to get energy from it. Plants, on the other hand, they're going to be able to make their own food. And they're going to be considered autotrophs, but we'll get to that in the next slide. So anyways, heterotrophs are going to get their energy from eating others. They eat food, which also means they're eating other organisms. Sometimes these other organisms are just types of molecules, or they're made up of organic molecules. Now, hopefully you remember what organic means in this situation. If not, I want you to write to the side, maybe on the left-hand side, and draw like an arrow to the word organic. You're going to write that it's made of carbon and hydrogen atoms. Sometimes you have to identify from a list of chemical formulas which specific thing is organic. And if you can find the one that has carbon and hydrogen in it, then you will have found the right answer. But heterotrophs can make energy through respiration. Now here, the way that they're using the term respiration does not mean breathing. When you breathe and you take a breath in and then out, that is breathing, okay? That is taking air into your lungs and pushing it back out. Respiration is what occurs to the air after you bring it into your lungs. Where does it go? That is what respiration is dealing with. Respiration very specifically occurs inside each of your cells, inside the mitochondria, and that's where the gas exchange for respiration occurs. So breathing is obviously necessary to bring in those oxygen molecules that are needed for respiration, And then when you're breathing out, you're actually releasing the waste gases that were made during the process of respiration. We're going to get to respiration in chapter 9, but you need to know that they're not talking about breathing. They're talking about a cellular process here. All right, so like I said before, plants are autotrophs. Please highlight autotrophs. And that prefix auto means self, and troph means nutrition, so they can make their own food. They get their energy from sunlight. They have a very awesome adaptation where they have little solar panels in their cells, and they can catch the energy from the sun and use that energy to make organic molecules or food from carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is an inorganic molecule. You may want to add that there. And why is it considered inorganic? What is it missing? It's missing a hydrogen, right? If it was carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, then that would be considered organic. But because it's only got a carbon, it's considered inorganic. And so plants or autotrophs will make their energy through photosynthesis. The other thing, there's another process that's called chemosynthesis that some organisms can use to make energy. Not plants, but more bacteria. So maybe you should add that down at the bottom. Instead of photo, you're going to write CHEMO synthesis. And that just means these organisms can use chemicals in their environment to make food for themselves. These would be organisms that live like in the bottom of the ocean where there is no sunlight, near these hydrothermal vents. These organisms might live where, you have Yellowstone National Park and those big geysers of hot water. It's not a very nice environment. It's kind of acidic, and there's a lot of chemicals there that these organisms have figured out a way to get food out of that, or how to make food out of it. So that's just another extra that it will come up once in a while. So it's good to know that it's not just photosynthesis that helps autotrophs, but there's something called chemosynthesis too. All right, so here is the general equation for photosynthesis. The green version is the equation in words, and then below that in like the light blue or purpley color, that is the chemical formula. You need to know both, and I want you to put a star on this slide and write that to yourself. Know, K-N-O-W, know both of these. So photosynthesis. Plants need carbon dioxide and water and energy, which is sunlight. The arrow, remember, means to produce, so you may want to write that on the arrow there if you don't remember. The arrow always means produces glucose and oxygen. Glucose is an organic compound because it has carbon and hydrogen in it. And oxygen for plants is a waste product. Plants don't need oxygen for photosynthesis. That's a waste product of photosynthesis. At the bottom, you can see the chemical formula, okay? So carbon dioxide, they have a 6 in front of it because they're talking about 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. So 6 molecules of CO2 are involved in this process, plus 6 molecules of water, or H2O, plus light energy, is going to produce C6H12O6. That is the formula for glucose. And 6 molecules of oxygen. Now, if you were to go through and count up how many C's there are on one side of the arrow, they're going to be the same as on the other side of the arrow. So if you take a look way back at carbon dioxide, there's a 6 in front of it. That means there's 6 carbon atoms on the left-hand side. And if you go over on the right, you can see there's a C6. That means there's 6 atoms within that molecule, and they balance each other out. And if you ever get to taking chemistry, you'll do a lot of this equation balancing kind of stuff. You don't have to remember those big 6's in front of these. If you just remember CO2 plus H2O plus light produces C6H12O6 plus O2, I'm okay with that. You don't always have to know that there's that big 6 in front. If you want to memorize it that way, by all means, please do. But as long as you know the chemical formulas and what goes where, that will make me happy. All right, question time. An inorganic molecule required by green plants for the process of photosynthesis is. So go back and remember, what does inorganic mean? Inorganic means it does not have both carbon and hydrogen. So when you look down the list, when we learned about organic molecules, we can cross off starch and cross off glucose because those are both organic. They both have carbon and hydrogen in them. That leaves you with oxygen and carbon dioxide. Now we go back up to the question, an inorganic molecule required. So this is something the plant needs. So you might want to write that above required. What does a plant need for the process of photosynthesis? Does it need oxygen or does it need carbon dioxide? Go back and look at the previous page, the previous slide. They need carbon dioxide, don't they? So that's what you're going to circle. Okay, so now all of these processes that we talk about this year, like photosynthesis and cellular respiration and cell division, reproduction, all of these processes need energy. And this is what all organisms need. We've talked about ATP before. This is called adenosine triphosphate. It is the cellular form of energy. And it is made of an adenine, a ribose, and 3 phosphate groups. I do want you to highlight the 3 letters there, ATP. I'm not expecting you to remember adenosine triphosphate, but you do need to know what ATP is. It's cell energy, okay? Now, if you notice something about its structure, adenine is a nitrogen base, ribose is a sugar, and there's phosphate on here. This should look somewhat familiar because when we talked about organic compounds, we talked about nucleic acids having a sugar, a phosphate, and a base. And that's exactly what this has. And this is a type of nucleic acid. This nucleic acid happens to be made in mitochondria. So you're going to add that to this slide. ATP, somewhere on here, you're going to write is made in the mitochondria. And just a cool little factoid. Mitochondria has its own DNA. Now, inside of a cell, we have the nucleus, and that's where all of the DNA that kind of controls the cell is located. But it's very interesting because scientists have found that mitochondria also have their own little set of DNA, and that's why they can make this ATP inside of a mitochondria, because this is a type of nucleic acid. We are going to talk about later why mitochondria might have its own DNA. And by the way, chloroplasts do too. So you have to think about, why would these things have their own DNA? Where would that have come from? Okay, so back to energy though. So ATP is cell energy. The question is, how do you get energy out of this molecule? And what it is when the bond on those 3 phosphates, like that last phosphate, when that one is broken off, that's where energy gets released. So that's why the energy is stored basically in the chemical bonds of this molecule. All right, what is the role of ATP in cell activities? It's kind of like a battery. You know, ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. This is like having a fully charged battery. When you break off one of those phosphate groups, there's still some energy left in the molecule, and you can see that at the bottom it's called adenosine diphosphate because there's 2 phosphates. That's just like having a partially charged battery. And there's cell processes that can add that phosphate back on to recharge it. But this ATP is a very good source of energy for cells to use as quick energy. Well, even though ATP is very efficient at transferring energy, it's not very good at storing it for long term. And the other thing is that the ATP can only be used within the cell that is making it. It can't be shared between cells. So living organisms have found a way to store large amounts of energy in the form of glucose. A molecule of glucose, one of those little hex or pentagons, has 90 times more energy stored in it than ATP does. So that's kind of a bonus that these organisms have this adaptation where they can take the energy and store it in glucose. And then the cells can decide whenever they need to, they can break apart these glucose molecules very slowly and make ATP to use for when they need it. Okay, so a lot of energy comes from the sun, but it can't all be used right away. So these plants have to have a way to store that sun's energy, okay? On this plant, it is showing you the locations of where it has stored the energy. Now, tomato plants don't grow potatoes, but they're just showing you different places on a plant, any plant, where this sun's energy can be stored. So if you look at the picture, you can see tomatoes. That is stored sugar, okay? And then down in the roots, that looks like a potato down there. That is stored sugar, okay? Even the onions that we looked at in lab, onions grow underground. That is stored sugar, okay? Any fruit or tuber like a potato or vegetable, any of that kind of stuff that we eat, that is stored energy, okay? I would like you to highlight actually the stored energy places on this plant. That way you can hopefully remember that these are places that sugar gets stored in. So photosynthesis is actually broken down into multiple reactions. We're going to learn it this year as like one big reaction. If you were to take AP Bio or go to college and take biochemistry, you actually learn about all the different little chemical reactions that help absorb the energy and process it and do different stuff with it. We're not going to go into that much detail, but there are different energy building reactions. One of the reactions collects the sun's energy, and we know that the organelle that's used for that is the chloroplast. And it uses carbon dioxide as the carbon source for making new sugars. These sugars can look like glucose, they can be called cellulose, that's a big storage sugar, or starch. And sometimes this energy can be used to build other organic molecules. It can help build proteins or lipids, other types of carbohydrates. It can be made, you can help build DNA. And then this energy can be stored as energy for future use or to be eaten by other animals. Now, just so you know, plants don't go through photosynthesis so that animals can eat them, okay? Plants go through photosynthesis so that they can do their whole life cycle thing. It's a bonus that we can get the energy from the plants when we eat them, but that's not their purpose, okay? Photosynthesis is the purpose of photosynthesis is to make energy for that plant, okay, or that autotroph. So here we're breaking down, going from a big image like a leaf down to the nitty-gritty details. So let's follow this flow pattern here. We've got the picture at the top left of leaves on a plant. These are the solar panels for the plant. They can capture the energy. Now, if we break it down a little bit and we look at a side view, like we cut and do a cross section through the leaf, that's what the second picture is showing us. And you can see all different sorts of layers in there. The third picture, the one in the middle, is looking at just one cell. That particular cell you can see has a ton of chloroplasts in it. All those little green circles are chloroplasts. And then if you go and break it down more and you look at one of those chloroplasts, there's actually stuff inside of it. Some of that stuff has a green pigment called chlorophyll, which I would like you to highlight down there at the bottom. Chlorophyll is a pigment. This pigment is designed to capture the energy from sunlight. And in the cross section here of this chloroplast, either the one in the circle or the one to the right, you can see these green stacks. These green stacks are called thylakoids, and I'll spell it for you, T-H-Y-L-A-K-O-I-D-S. Lakoids. And these are the places where they store chlorophyll. They're like little storage towers for chlorophyll. And some of the reactions for photosynthesis occur inside of these stacks. But basically, they're going to help absorb the sunlight. They can take in the carbon dioxide, and then they can make sugar, energy, and release oxygen. Okay, question time now. So the equation below represents a summary of a biological process. Biological, so this occurs in living things. It says carbon dioxide plus water produces glucose and oxygen. Now obviously, because we've been talking about photosynthesis, this should be pretty obvious what this formula is representing. Now the question is saying this process is completed in, is it mitochondria, ribosomes, cell membranes, or chloroplasts? I'll let you think about it for a minute. And the answer is chloroplasts. Okay, another question. Leaves of green plants contain openings known as stomates, which are opened and closed by specialized cells allowing for gas exchange between the leaf and the outside environment. Which phrase best represents the net flow of gases involved in photosynthesis into and out of a leaf through these openings on a sunny day? So sunny day is the key here. And we're talking about photosynthesis. So what does a plant need and what does a plant want to get rid of? Well, before looking at our answers, you can write at the top, plants need carbon dioxide and water, and they need to get rid of oxygen, and then they are also making sugar. So now we're going to look for the answer that sounds like that. Number one, carbon dioxide moves in, oxygen moves out. Well, that's probably the correct answer. Let's read them all just to make sure, but number one is probably the right one. Number two, carbon dioxide and oxygen move in, ozone moves out. We haven't talked at all about ozone, so number two is not correct. Oxygen moves in, nitrogen moves out. Nitrogen is not involved directly in photosynthesis, so you can cross off number three. Number four, water and ozone move in, carbon dioxide moves out. Well, we know water does need to move in, but carbon dioxide definitely does not move out. So cross off number four. And we are definitely right with going with answer one. All right, so kind of summarizing, you're actually being shown here in this diagram the different types of reactions that are occurring inside the chloroplast. Like I said, I want you to remember it as a whole process. When you get into higher level science classes, then they break it down for you. But for our purposes, the formula you see up at the top, that is the formula that I need you to know. This picture is showing you oxygen or water going in and carbon dioxide going in, and then oxygen coming out and sugar coming out. Don't worry about the middle part, and sunlight obviously over on the left-hand side. The middle part there is showing you that the plants can make ATP because this process of photosynthesis needs a little internal energy to help things keep moving, okay? But its purpose for photosynthesis is to make these sugars because that's going to be its long-term source of energy. So here's a question. It's using a similar diagram, but you just need to know what it is that's going in and what it is that's coming out, okay? And what you may want to do, before we even look at the question at all, it's got light, H2O, and then another gas coming in. I want you to write down the name of that gas that would be needed to go in here. And you should be writing carbon dioxide. And then if we go down to the bottom, there's a gas coming out and an organic compound coming out. I want you to write the names of those as well. So the gas coming out is oxygen, and the organic compound will be glucose, okay? Now let's take a look at the question. The diagram represents part of a life process in the leaf chloroplast. So we know we're talking about photosynthesis because it says a leaf chloroplast. If the process illustrated in the diagram is interrupted by a chemical at point X, there would be an immediate effect on the release of, so what is, if you don't have step X occurring, What is the immediate problem? You're not going to have the gas at the bottom, which is oxygen, right? Eventually, you're not going to produce the organic compound, but immediately you're not going to have answer number 4, the gas, oxygen, coming out. Which activity occurs in the process of photosynthesis? So think about photosynthesis. What is it in terms of words? Because just by skimming, you've got a lot of words in your answers. So you're taking sun's energy and making food, right? Okay. So number 1, chemical energy from organic molecules is converted into light energy. Well, that's kind of the opposite, right? So you can cross off number 1. Number 2, organic molecules are obtained from the environment. Not for photosynthesis, right? We're not obtaining them from the environment. The plant is making them. So you can cross that off. Number 3, organic molecules are converted into inorganic food molecules. We talked about glucose being organic food molecule, and it's taking inorganic molecules and converting them into organic. So 3 is kind of the opposite of what we want as well. Number 4, light energy is converted into the chemical energy of organic molecules. That sounds like the right answer. We're taking light energy and converting or turning it into chemical energy of organic molecules, and those organic molecules are glucose. Okay, last slide for this first part. Let's answer this question. Which biological process is the main source of atmospheric oxygen? How does the oxygen get into the air? Where is it coming from? Respiration, photosynthesis, hydrolysis, or synthesis? Because I put this question in with the photosynthesis chapter, I think it's pretty obvious. But if you think about this question, and it wasn't placed in this particular chapter, you have to take a minute and think. Biological process, okay, so this is something that happens in living things. And atmospheric oxygen, that's the air, oxygen in the air. Where did that come from? You have to think about processes that make oxygen go into the air. And if you break it down, you think about, okay, we're breathing in oxygen, so we're not putting it into the air, but plants are putting it into the air. So they use number 2, photosynthesis. Okay, so now you can move on to part 2.